We've now got our header complete. It looks fantastic, and we can definitely use it again on future projects wherever we need a header. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you right now that that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take a lot of components out of this application and use them on future components in the future. So we're now ready to move on to the main body of our application, the big list of albums that users will scroll through. Remember the whole point of our app, we want to have a list of albums to show to the user. In this mock-up right here, I'm just showing a single album, but really there should be multiple albums that users should be able to scroll through. This means that we have two big challenges now lined up for us. Number one, we need to figure out how to get a list of albums to show to the user. So literally a list of images with album images, album name, artist title, all that kind of good stuff. We need a list of them to show to the user. That's challenge number one. And challenge number two is, once we figure out how we will get access to that list of data, we need to figure out how we're going to kind of architect, there we go, excuse me, how we're going to architect our components to show a list of content to the users. So essentially, we need to know how to build a list of content. That's the big challenge here. That's what we have to figure out how to do. So let's do this one step at a time. We're going to start off with talking about how we're going to get a list of albums to show to the user. Now, we certainly could hard code a list of albums in our code base here. We can just say, here's a list of albums, here's where the images are, all that kind of good stuff. But you know what? That is not the best flow for our application. And here's the reason for that. When we go and deploy this application to the App Store, be it the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, it takes a while to deploy our application. Like, it has to go through a deploy process of several days. So if it turns out that one day we decide we want to update our list of albums on the fly, well, we're out of luck. We have to make an update to our app before it can get published to the App Store, and that can take several days. So instead, I'm going to suggest that we make that we retrieve a list of albums to show to the user from some online endpoint, from some API. I've already taken the liberty of setting up an API that will display a list of albums for us. Let's go check it out. In my browser, I'm going to navigate to rallycoding.herokuapp.com/API/music albums. One quick thing here, make sure you're going to herokuapp.com and not just Heroku. So let's check this out. Okay, so here's our list of albums. When we make a GET request to this endpoint, we get back an array of objects where each object represents one album that will show to the user. So in total, we have 5 albums to show to our user with data from this endpoint. Note that if your JSON, as it appears on the screen, doesn't look as nice as this, if it's just a big blob of text, that's totally fine. I just have a plugin that formats JSON nicely for me. So this is the data that we will want to somehow fetch to our application and show to our user once we've loaded it. So we need to figure out how to make an AJAX request or an HTTP request from our mobile application to fetch this list of data. And then more critically, once we have the list of data or all these different albums, we need to figure out a way to build a list out of all these different albums, all these different objects right here. So that's our goal. For step 2, once we fetch this data, we need to build a list of albums. Let's do a quick discussion about how we might design some components to do this. I'm going to suggest that we make 2 separate components to show this list of albums to our user. First, we'll make a single component called an album list. The purpose of album list will be to fetch the list of data, or fetch the list of albums, and then once it has been fetched, it will render several album detail components. So we'll have an album list and an album detail. The purpose of album detail right here is just to show a single card to our user. The thing that has the album name, the image, and the Buy Now button at the bottom. So album detail is about just showing a single album, whereas album list is about fetching that list of data and then rendering multiple album details. Okay, so that's our plan. Let's take a quick break and then continue in the next section and start setting up the scaffold for this album list and album detail, and also figure out exactly how we're going to fetch that list of albums via an HTTP request.